Are you looking at the screen?
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Smith here at the Case Foundation, and I am so happy to host our second session of CaseSoup. This is actually my first session, so I've been studying all the training tapes from Carrie and Kristen, and I hope you'll forgive any blurbs and blubs that I make. I am joined today by Donna Callejon, who is the Chief Business Officer for GlobalGiving, and she's going to talk about their experiences in engaging the public through online challenges. And this is a part of our series that we're calling Citizen-Centered Solutions, which is looking at the explosion in all of these Wisdom of the Crowd programs. You know, here at the Case Foundation, we started experimenting with the Wisdom of the Crowd programs way back in 2007 when we launched our Make It Your Own Awards, and then Donna and our team did the America's Giving Challenge together. We've also done Change Begins With Me, and we are really excited about the potential for all of these programs that goes directly to the crowd to find out how we can innovate in new ways. GlobalGiving, for those of you who don't know it, is an online giving marketplace that connects consumers with the countries that they care about and the causes that they care about. And you know, GlobalGiving has been an absolute leader in the citizen-centered solution space. Everything from the America's Giving Challenge that we did together to their new open challenges to now some work that they're doing with Pepsi Refresh program or project. So we could not be more delighted to have Donna here today. I'm excited to talk to Donna, but I'm also excited about hearing from all of you. And there are multiple ways that you can get your questions in. One, you can chat below on the Ustream screen. You can tweet, but just make sure you do #CaseSoup. And for all of those who want to email them in so they can come just a little slower, you can email your questions to casesoup@casefoundation.org. And if you can't watch this whole session right now, or you want to come back later, or you just heard something that you have to hear again, this will be recorded and it will be up again later today. So let's go ahead and get started. Donna, why don't you start off by telling us what is GlobalGiving in layman's term? What do you all do every day over there at GlobalGiving?
Sure. Well, first, can I just say thanks?
Of course.
So thanks to Michael and the rest of the Case team. You guys can't see them because they're off screen, but they're over there in the room next to us to make sure this all goes smoothly. So as with everything you guys do, it's high quality, so we really appreciate that.
Thank you.
You know, GlobalGiving is what you said. It's really an online marketplace for what I call givers of all shapes and sizes to find organizations that they're passionate about or projects that they're passionate about, to be able to look at, we have over 1,000 projects currently on the site, look at a wide range of interests, from climate change, you know, projects, see, blubs and blurs, projects that are addressing climate change issues, to girls' education in developing countries, to even, you know, lots of projects in the United States. So people can find among those 1,100 or so projects something that they're passionate about, give to it a minimum of $10, and part of our promise is then that they'll get updates about what's been done with their money. So once a quarter at least, they'll get an email saying, hey, the project you gave to a few months ago posted an update, here's a link to the detail. And there might be a video, there might be photos, there might be a couple of paragraphs of an update. And this retail manifestation of global giving at globalgiving.org is really the vision, the manifestation of the vision of our founders, who, as you know, came from the World Bank and had experienced sort of central planning type giving and aid, and really saw the power through the development of something at the World Bank called the Development Marketplace, of a more bottom-up approach.
So see innovation coming out of the World Bank. That's so exciting.
Yes, in the year 2000 even. I don't think there was much technology involved in the development marketplace. It was actually like a bazaar.
Right,
you know,
right.
I like to call it a flea market,
right.
Even. And it was really from that experience that they said we should do this commercially. And there are so many people in the U.S., and we have a sister site in the U.K., who care about what's happening around the world. And even more importantly, there are so many terrific individuals and organizations around the world that have great ideas. They work and live in their community. They know what the challenges are. They have a pretty good idea of what the solutions are, but they just need some additional capital to help test it, potentially iterate on it, and, you know, in the lucky ones, go to scale. And so we wanted to create a platform where those great innovators could put their work, and donors of, as I say, any shape or size, $10, $10,000, could support them.
Exciting. So it sounds like global giving is kind of leading the whole pack of people that's making the world smaller and making it more accessible.
Well, I don't know about leading. I'll take that. But we certainly like to count ourselves among that group, for
Excellent.
sure. For sure.
So let's get to the point of the whole citizen-centered solutions. One, why have you guys decided to go that route, and what have been some of your biggest experiment in that space?
Yeah. So we're totally founded on the concept of citizen-based solutions, because the people I just mentioned, the social entrepreneurs in Zimbabwe or in Orissa in India or in DC, those folks are citizen philanthropists. I mean, so many of them start their organizations just with their blood, sweat, and tears. And so they're effectively giving of their time. And so we, while a lot of philanthropy focuses on who has resources and who doesn't, we actually really view it as a match of bringing different resources to the table.
Right.
And so the very core of global giving is at the very core of global giving is a commitment to really unleashing that potential on all sides of the equation. And so we sort of feel like citizen-centered philanthropy is what we are. From a more theoretical standpoint, our founders were big fans of the wisdom of the crowds, and pretty much they're the academics in the group. I'm just the practical person. But just all of the
gravity.
Gravity. They're very serious. But all of these theories that began emerging in the late 80s that have now been tested in other sectors and now have been tested and continue to be tested in the philanthropic sector around that it isn't necessarily an expert that makes the best decision. And actually our founder Dennis just put out a blog post on this very subject on his Huffington Post blog yesterday.
Right.
Just talking about his experience, right, as an expert. And I can tell you from my prior life, being a so-called expert at Fannie Mae, how well that worked out too. Is this when I say I left 10 years ago?
Yes, I think that's good.
Right. So anyway, so the citizen engagement is just core. It's core. And in fact, as you mentioned, Case Foundation started this in 2007. And then we partnered up in 2008, late 2007, early
right.
2008. Global Giving actually started doing this in 2005.
Okay.
We ran, it's interesting that we're doing this session at the same time the Global Philanthropy Forum is taking place. Because at the 2005 Global Philanthropy Forum, we actually brought about a dozen social entrepreneurs from around the world and had one of these marketplaces at the Philanthropy Forum. And there were some exercises there about decision making for who should get money.
Okay.
And we put up some money to do this, and there was sort of an open discussion, moderated discussion about the funds. And then even in 2006 and early 2007, we experimented with some very small scale online challenges. So as a way to determine whether or not an organization really understood what global giving was and what they could use the platform for, we started asking people to either get votes or get donations as sort of proof that they had networks.
Right,
and
right.
that the crowd, there were some people in the crowd behind them.
Right, right.
And so we've been experimenting literally since 2005 with this. And
so you're saying you were ahead of us, is what you're telling me.
If you say so. It was very small
Well, we're in
scale.
good company.
We are, yeah. You guys took it to a different level for sure.
It's really interesting. I want to come back to this topic, but I just got a little note that says it looks like we're having some troubles with the live chat working. So the best way to get your questions in will be to use Twitter and use the hashtag #CaseSoup, or create a Ustream login. So please keep those questions coming. So Donna, just back on that quickly, as you talk about all of the experiments that you've done in this space, one of the earliest criticisms that we received when we started doing this work was, it's wonderful to get involvement from the crowd, but experts have a role too. And how do you ensure that ideas that are being funded are worthy, impactful, they're going to actually follow through if you don't have kind of reliable experts that are at the beginning of the process?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure that we necessarily buy into they have to have experts in the beginning part.
Okay.
There's this raging debate in the development field between Jeff Sachs,
Right. An expert, some would say.
An expert who has created a community of experts.
Right, absolutely.
And a model.
Right.
That is, and I don't mean to be disparaging at all, that sort of takes its model and goes to locations where people need help.
Right.
And then works with the local community to implement the solutions that the experts have created. Again, working with the community. And then on the other side of the equation is Bill Easterly, who wrote White Man's Burden, and who believes very strongly that in that same community, there are undoubtedly leaders in the community who have essentially made themselves experts on the issues.
Right.
Because that's what they do every day.
Right.
They are the farmers who know what the challenges are with the crops in their particular region. They are the women who are trying to figure out how to create a safe space for their children.
Right.
They are the kids.
Right.
I mean, crazy, you might actually ask kids what they need. But they are the kids who are being forced into being child soldiers, let's say.
Right.
And so there might be one of those kids that emerges from that and really has a sense of how this could be different for his peers. And so we come at it from very much that second point of view. Having said that, I think there often is a role for expertise in implementation. A great example of this would be an organization that we work with called Agros, which is based in Seattle, but all of their work is in Central America, and all of the staff in the field are native to the country that they're doing the work in. And so they have basic modules of work that they do with communities that organize themselves. And they are typically subsistence farmers, or they're working for another farm. The women might be making some crafts, but they don't really know how to market them.
Right.
And the kids might be finishing up school in 3rd or 4th grade.
Right.
And so Agros works with the local community and the people in that community to figure out what are the real challenges. As we come together and try to create more structure around our community, what do we need? And then they bring experts in to help with that. But it isn't a set solution. It isn't a cookie cutter solution.
Right.
So that they try to implement everywhere.
I know that model sounds really interesting. I mean, because you actually have someone that's hands-on in that community. It's taking wisdom of the crowds, directly to the crowd, and you have someone that's working there.
Right.
I'm going to take a question from email, but after this question for email, I want to talk a little bit about the role that you guys are playing in the Pepsi Refresh project, and go a little bit more into how do you balance the experts in the crowds, and this idea of making sure that you're coming up with good ideas. But first, we have a question from email, and the question is saying something along.
Do we know who it is? Do we get to make fun of anyone?
We don't know who it is. Let's call them John.
Okay.
Hi, John.
Hello, John.
Or
Johnetta.
Janetta. That's better.
Okay.
So the question is along the lines of, we've seen some data here and there that indicates that people may be getting a little contest fatigue. I've heard that data. How do organizations go about mitigating the risk, and do you think that these will become like bake sales? That's funny wording, because we talked about when we did our giving challenge, we hoped they would become like bake sales or car washes.
Right.
So there's a lot going on right now, and it seems like everything you hear is vote for me or do this or do that. How do you make sure that you're avoiding contest fatigue?
It's a great question, and you mentioned Pepsi Refresh, and I'll talk in a minute about what our role is there. But one of the we had an interesting experience where one of the finalists, as we were talking with them, we were talking to 2 different people in the organization. This is a nonprofit, And one person said, this Pepsi Refresh thing was really hard. And, we really had to badger people every day to vote. And it was hard. And I'm not sure it was, net good. And this organization's getting a fairly sizable grant.
Right.
The next day we talked to somebody else in the organization, and that person said, this is the best thing that ever happened to us. And it engaged our constituents in a way that has never happened before. We were able to communicate with them regularly. We got feedback from them.
Right.
So, even within one organization, I think there are going to be naysayers and proponents, which is just kind of natural. On the broader point, I think, like with any fundraising strategy, an organization or an individual or even a for-profit company, in the case of some of these challenges and contests, really has to pick its spot.
Right.
It's participating in every challenge doesn't work for 99.9% of organizations. There are a couple of organizations that have become expert.
Yeah, we know those.
As we know, one of whom's located just right across the river here. And they're very, very creative, and clearly their donor base, community lists, all those folks are okay with it.
Right.
And they know that.
Right.
And I think they're actually trying to figure out if they've hit a point of fatigue. So first thing is know your community and your audience and decide very clearly which of these things make sense for you. Interestingly, we see in Refresh some very large organizations submit and then really don't mobilize.
Right.
And we're trying to get a little bit more information about why.
Right.
Because you would think that an organization with a brand name with big lists would be able to put out the word pretty easily
you would think.
And win.
Yeah.
But the $250,000 winners this month are completely unheard of, unknown, small organizations. Who really mobilized.
And that's what we saw in our giving challenges.
Exactly.
The big players that we thought would be the big gorilla in the room never manifested.
Yeah. And so, I definitely hear the fatigue question. One of the things that we've tried to do at Global Giving is, because we have I mentioned about 1,100 projects. Those are run by 650, 700 organizations. And what we try to do is start people out. We're actually running a challenge right now. Start people out with some sort of a push, right, that create that sense of urgency. But then for the organizations that are actually already on the site, using it, et cetera, we're very thoughtful about how frequently and in what way do we engage them.
Right.
So, for instance, we tried out something earlier this spring called Bonus Day.
Okay.
And so this was almost like, hey, you've been on our website, and let's do we have some funds set aside. Let's just do a one-day thing.
Okay.
So you only have one day when you have to mobilize folks.
Right.
And Global Giving, through sort of excess funds that we have in our matching fund, put up a 30% match for every donation that came in that day. And it mobilized about $220,000 worth of giving in one day, which isn't bad for a day's work.
Extraordinary, absolutely.
So that's an example of, trying to put some boundaries around it, not force our community of project organizations to pick and choose between 3 or 4 or 5 different challenges.
Right.
But and not everybody participated, so people decided.
Right.
Similarly, we are looking at thematic challenges.
Okay.
So later this year, in fact, we have a call for participants out. Later this year, we're going to be doing a green.
Where is the call for participants on your
That's
website?
a darn good question. Allison, help! She's out there somewhere.
We're gonna
get it
somewhere, maybe on globalgiving.org.
It's probably like globalgiving.org/green, but I might have that wrong.
We're gonna find out for you, and we'll chat it and let you know before this session is over.
And so that's really focused on climate change.
Okay.
Okay. So, and that will be, and in this case, one of our partners, the Packard Foundation, one of our funders, is funding some experimental work on climate change and online markets, interestingly enough. And so they've put up some of the funds for that.
Okay.
And so not everybody's going to compete in that.
Right.
So I think for organizations, it's really like pick your battles.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great advice. I know I'm the host, but can I add something as well?
I don't know.
Will you give me permission?
Go for it.
Okay. I would just say to
Can I have a
people
sip of
that
water while
yes,
you're doing
please
that?
have a sip of water while we'll take this little break with me talking. From the challenges that we've run, people always think that engaging the public has to be about voting now. Now that you have voting or these massive campaigns. But when we started our Make It Your Own Awards, in fact, when we do any new program here, it starts with guidelines review meetings where we're bringing in diverse groups of stakeholders just to sit around a table and say, should we do this? How should we do this? Who should be involved? What should the grant size be? We've done external reviewers, figuring out a way to engage diverse groups of people in the crowds, so that there are ways that you can engage the public and get stakeholders involved and get that wisdom that you need without always having to jump for the massive prize and challenge program every time.
And I think, you mentioned Pepsi Refresh. I know that was done prior to that program being launched as well.
Right,
Our partner
exactly.
at Good,
Exactly.
who's a key component of Pepsi Refresh, conducted focus groups, talked with a lot of organizations and individuals, all sizes, and to try to get at those questions.
Right.
And when we were in the planning stages for the prizes there, or the grants there, range from $5,000 to $250,000 every month, and so the number and dollar amounts changed as we were getting the program put together.
Right.
Based upon that feedback.
Right. Absolutely.
So definitely
Excellent.
worth it. Great point.
So
Great
since
point, Michael.
Why, thank you so much, Donna. And look at this beautiful shirt Donna's wearing today. Give. So since we were talking about Pepsi Refresh and Good, why don't we go into this conversation? For those of you who don't know, the biggest gorilla in the room right now that's really innovating in this space,
gorilla.
a friendly gorilla that's innovating in this
puppy.
space.
A Marmaduke.
A puppy-rilla.
A pupperilla. I like that.
Nana from Peter Pan, let's call it. Anyway.
Okay, you lost me on that.
The biggest prize and challenge program that's going on right now that's working to get wisdom of the crowds is the Pepsi Refresh Project, which is giving away $20 million this year. It's actually probably more than that because there's been some money that's been thrown out for other things.
It's that because the web-based program is less than 20. So,
okay, so still about $20 million this year, and you can compete every month. That makes me tired just thinking about it. But every month, if you are a person, if you are a small business owner, if you are a nonprofit, and you have an idea to refresh your community, how's that for a pitch for Pepsi?
Perfect.
Pepsi Refresh Everything. Then you can go ahead and you could submit a grant project going all the way up to $250,000.
Exactly.
So Donna, tell us a little bit more about what you guys are doing with the Pepsi Refresh project and how it's going.
Sure. And just if anyone hasn't heard of it, it's at refresheverything.com. So our Global Giving's role, first of all, Dennis, our founder, is on the advisory board. But our role is really working with Good. They're our chief partner on this to ensure.
And who is Good? I know who Good is, but tell everyone else.
Well, Good is a company, a social enterprise based in California. People are probably familiar with Good Magazine or the Good website, and it's essentially awesome people who got together to really highlight stories that are at the nexus of business in the community, essentially, business and social change. And so we work with them on all of the grant-making aspects of the Pepsi Refresh program. They're doing a lot of other stuff in the project as well, but in this case, we work in conjunction with them. Our specific role is really leveraging, and this really has nothing to do with globalgiving.org, which we were talking about earlier, but what we found is we built this platform in order to bring on those hundreds of organizations around the world. We've built a proprietary workflow for due diligence, because due diligence for non-U.S. organizations, as you know, is somewhat complicated. And we have grant-making experience. Not just to nonprofits in the U.S., but to nonprofits outside, as well as to individuals in some cases, and occasionally to for-profits that are doing work for that has public benefit. And so what we do is leverage these capabilities that we've built to support our companies that are our partners on various campaigns, obviously the largest of which is Refresh. And so our role is due diligence, and validation and vetting of the finalists.
Okay.
So if you submit your idea and you get, you're in the top vote getter group, and there are 32 grants a month, then you get handed over to Global Giving, where one of our 3 awesome people who works on this full time will work with you to set up a grant agreement, lay out a project plan, budget specificity, because the website has some specificity for each idea, but doesn't dig very deep.
Right.
And so we go through that process all in the course of 2 weeks every month.
Wow.
For 32 finalists. And then we set up milestones for them in their plan, do the grant agreements, get all the legal stuff signed, and realize that we do have, and Pepsi really wanted this, and they're getting individuals, for-profits, and nonprofits. And so different types of agreements for each of those. And then we'll be working with each winner to set milestones, and when they hit those milestones, they have to do reporting for us, and then a second tranche of the money gets released. So it's sort of typically a 50-50 split.
Right.
So we'll be following these organizations over the course of the implementation of their project. We also then, when they get their grant agreement, hand them off to Good.
Okay.
Because Good has hired some terrific people as grant managers. So they're working with each of the winners to help bring other resources to bear. So if they really, if it's a grant for something that's really in the planning stages, they might help them with the plan. They might work with other partners on the ground to help with implementation.
Right.
They might help with evaluation. They might, bring. They're just there to bring to bear as many resources as possible.
Right. I don't think most people knew or probably know the level of detail that's going on behind the scenes.
Right.
This is not just about submitting ideas, and I have to say, when I first heard about it, I became an even stronger champion of the program itself. We heard a lot of criticism about the. Or some criticism. It's getting smaller and smaller every day about these prize and challenge programs being the American Idol of philanthropy. It's just popularity contests. But when you talk about that level of vetting and that level of handholding and that level of resources, it really can take a project to the next level.
Absolutely. And I think it's also, there's been a lot written about, is this just purely a marketing campaign for Pepsi?
Right.
And being on the inside,
right.
I can say unequivocally, and I'm not too much of a pushover, as you know, that this is way more for them than just a marketing program. Way more. They want to create a movement that is where people in communities really have access to what they need to help make their communities better.
Right.
And the best thing that could happen would be, from their perspective, would be if lots of other companies with the competing brands, learned from what they're doing and then figured out how they can have the same kind of positive impact.
Absolutely. And if they sell a little soda in the process, good. So be it for them.
Especially if it's diet.
It's so interesting. There are all sorts of examples of for-profit businesses that are doing well or doing good while they're doing well for themselves. And I think this new generation of people that's coming along, millennials especially, recognize that you don't always have to go to a nonprofit to see good being done.
Absolutely.
And that if companies that have these big, large, powerful brands can do some good in the process, then so be it. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah, well, and I think that's the thing that really makes Refresh unique.
Right.
That it isn't just a list of, and then there's nothing wrong with these, but it isn't just a list of 10 pre-selected organizations.
Right.
Pepsi, this is not being run out of the Pepsi Foundation. Right. Or their corporate contributions, and so they're really willing to take risks.
Yep, absolutely.
They are, and we'll be watching and learning as we go.
So before I go to the next question from the viewers, you have to tell us, since you are involved in that level of vetting.
Yes.
I'll give you 2 choices of questions that you can answer, so you can get yourself off the hook. One, if you want to take the safe route, you can answer, tell us something behind the scenes that we don't know. Or 2, if you want to be a little bit more dangerous, have there been any yahoos? Have you gone to the vetting stage and thought, oh my goodness, what have we gotten ourselves into with this guy that wants to build some chicken suits for good?
Yeah, well, and that was one of the concerns, I think, that some out in the blogosphere raised?
Right.
Are these really legit
Right.
projects? And just from a timing standpoint, we've just finished the second round.
Okay.
Okay. So, and the second round finalists have not been announced as winners yet.
Okay.
We're just in that process right now.
Tell us right now. Just tell me in my ear.
This crowd thing, it's working.
Yeah?
Yeah. I mean, so far, so good.
Uh-huh.
There has not been one crackpot
Uh-huh.
that made it through. There has, sure, there are ideas that are on, because they're accepting 1,000 submissions a month.
Right.
So there are some pretty out there ideas.
Right.
The ones that are, questionable, this is exactly where the crowd thing comes in.
Right.
Because really those individuals probably don't have the networks to mobilize voters every day for 30 days and win.
Right.
Or people who come to refresh are not going to choose theirs. If for the seekers, the people who are just coming to the site saying, "Oh, what's on here? What do I want to vote for?" Typically not going to do that.
Right.
Now, is it possible there'll be some silly thing that somebody mobilizes on YouTube or something to get people to vote? Could be.
That's never happened in any contest.
Never. But I have to say that the grant recipients, the funded ideas and the about to be funded ideas are really, really inspiring. Awesome. They really are. I mean, it's everything from kids, high school kids who started up cheerleading squads for girls with disabilities, to big organizations like the American Legion, sending stuff to our troops.
Right.
And that's exactly what Global Giving is about. Is again just where are the best ideas?
Right.
And every idea won't be perfect. Everything won't be implemented perfectly. But with 32 winners a month for 12 months, there's going to be some great impact.
Absolutely.
out there.
Absolutely.
And just to tuck one other idea, and I'm sure you want to stop talking about this, move on to something else. But there's also a very significant commitment to impact assessment. And so that's again good, is sort of spearheading that.
And Pepsi's made that commitment.
Pepsi has made that commitment, both people-wise and monetarily. And they're looking at it from through a lot of different lenses. But I think what I would say is, at the end of the day, what really matters is what gets done because of this. And they totally get that. And so you're going to be, in these early months, most of the promotion has been about vote, 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 vote. And that will continue because there's 12 months of voting. But more and more what we're going to be seeing is stories about what's actually being done. And they've already started to come out.
That is exciting. So let's go to a question from the viewers. There are a couple questions that are around the idea of, our organization is considering doing an online challenge. What advice do you have for us? Any kind of top 5 list of, what you're seeing, how people are winning, getting forward?
Be persistent. So gather your lists, right? So it all starts with your center of the concentric circles. And I think, so number one is gather your list and ask regularly. So what we saw even, back in with the Giving Challenge is organizations that were so surprised that, their list was 1,000 people. But when they asked those people to spread the word, they did. And so the concentric circles just grew and grew and grew. And I remember one of the winners of the Giving Challenge was a group of students down at Mary Washington University, Students Helping Honduras. And they got in very late. They started mobilizing people 7 days before the end of the challenge, and they just had people emailing. I mean, they won. So first thing is, get your list together and then ask people to spread the word. You have to ask people.
So it's not going to be enough to just shoot an email out to your list.
Absolutely.
It's about activating your list.
It's exactly about activating the list. I think the second thing is you really do have to be persistent and a little bit of a nudge, right? So and I can't tell from the question if it's an organization who will run their own challenge or if they're thinking about participating in somebody else's.
Let's take the participating angle.
Okay. So depending upon the structure, you really need to time your reminders to people around what needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for instance, if it's a voting contest and people can vote every day,
Mm-hmm.
then you got to ask people to vote every day. And if you don't, chances are you're probably not going to get into the top.
So for those of us that have done any sort of kind of development
Yeah.
or list managing, the words of advice that we have always heard: can't over email your list.
Mm-hmm.
Each time you email your list, you're going to get someone who's going to unsubscribe.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
I think that's real.
Uh-huh.
I think that's real. What we've seen is with some of the organizations that participate in our challenges, and as well as with Refresh, is right up front, organizations or individuals are asking their constituents, are you willing to be contacted to be reminded?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
by
Mm-hmm.
asking that up front, you're essentially reminding, you have permission to nudge.
That's a great piece of advice. Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
we saw actually one of our employees and his buddy won a Refresh grant.
Okay.
It's another interesting thing about Refresh. Pepsi employees can win,
Right,
bottlers,
right.
anyone, I couldn't because I'm too close to
Right,
it, but
right.
one of our employees who left us now, and they won a $5,000 grant to go bike across the country and do
Okay.
local food stories and potlucks in 12 locations.
That is so neat.
So, but he set this up
Uh-huh.
on, they set up a Facebook page, and they set up a Twitter account, and they set up just a one-page website.
Right.
And through that, they asked people, are you willing for us to remind you every day?
Right.
And so he reminded us every morning. And that really made a difference, because I think then it wasn't just blasting your whole list, every day for 30 days. So that's, but you have to be persistent.
Right. Right.
I probably should have said this up front, but make sure it's the right challenge for you. I think that a lot of times people just think, well, I'll just put my name in there and maybe I'll get lucky.
Right, right.
It's work.
Right.
And if it's a thematically oriented one or a geographically oriented
Mhm,
one, really know which one fits best for you.
Right.
And then thank people.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like Katya. I can see Katya's on here. I mean, this is basics 101.
Mm-hmm.
Thank the people who voted for you or
Absolutely.
donated.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's and you'd be amazed how that doesn't happen.
It's so true. So true.
And
I mean, go back 100 years ago.
Yep.
And that's a piece of advice.
Yeah. And then
Right.
I think for organizations that have more resources, there are creative ways to participate.
Right.
There are. I mean, you talk about bake sales.
Right.
But some organizations we see have physical events where they
Right.
have people bring their laptops, or they go. You run into the people from Greenpeace or CARE on the corner
Right,
trying to get
right,
people to sign
right.
up for recurring donations.
Uh-huh.
Let people make a donation right there.
Exactly.
So you got to be creative about how you drive people to whatever the contest is as well.
I think that's great advice. So we heard from Donna, for those of you who are looking to participate in an online challenge, first get your list together and activate your list. I think secondly, we heard you've got to be a bit of a nudge. And I think a new piece of advice that we heard was, think about asking your people if they're okay with you
Being a nudge.
being a nudge, and you get permission
Yep.
to be a nudge. And then third, thank people. Make sure that you're constantly thanking folks when they do good works for you.
Mm-hmm. And share feedback.
Right. Absolutely. So we have another question here. From Twitter. It gives us back into the global giving context.
Okay.
Have you seen further engagement from people who have been involved in global giving contests? Do people who vote then become donors?
Great question. We generally don't run voting contests anymore.
Okay.
And this is part of our learning. I think I mentioned that in 2005, 2006, we ran some
Right.
voting contests. And we really exist for the reasons I talked about,
Mm-hmm.
so that great ideas and organizations around the world can have access to capital.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've gotten very clear that that's why we exist.
Mm-hmm.
And so voting contests, well, I'm not going to say we'll never do another one.
Right.
They are not in our sweet spot
Right.
for our platform. I can say that early on when we did a couple of them, the voters did not convert. Did not convert nearly at the levels that I think we had hoped or some of the participants had hoped. So the challenges that we run are much more about getting they're based on America's Giving Challenge.
Right,
Really,
right.
it's both dollars and numbers of donors. So, for instance, right now we have 150 plus organizations from around the world competing for relatively small bounties for the winners.
Okay.
But the winners are defined as both the organization or project, I should say, that gets the most dollars, but also the most donors.
Right, right.
And our minimum donation, as I mentioned, is $10. And so we really try to focus on getting people activated and that wisdom, sort of crowdfunding versus just crowdsourcing of input. So then I would say the question is, okay, once somebody gives for just a $10 donation, how's their retention rate?
Right.
Do they come back? And I would say this is something that we need to work on, for sure.
Okay.
I think what we find is, and we were talking last week about sort of the profile of the organizations on Global Giving. And about half of them are 501c3s and half are not.
Okay.
So they're organizations from all over the world. In some cases they're individuals, in some cases they're for-profit companies. But the vast majority are community-based organizations or NGOs that are registered in their country or in the process of registering, and we go through an equivalency and evaluation of them.
So you don't care if an organization on your site has a government license, a 501c3 status or something?
Oh, we care.
Okay.
I mean, we do check that stuff. So
but you said half are not, is what you said.
Right. So again, our vision is that anyone in the world who has a great idea. So, and there are lots of great U.S. organizations, obviously.
Right.
But we still do vetting on them.
Right. Right.
And then, like you said, half of them we go through this exercise
due diligence
of due diligence. And
I think that's groundbreaking. So I don't want to lose that point. Just this idea of some good ideas, just like the Pepsi Refresh Project, exist and are not incorporated. And they need resources, and they may not be at that level where they need to have a certain level of incorporation.
Yeah, or they might be incorporated, and I'm using your term loosely. They might be structured based upon the rules in another part of the world that are different.
Right, exactly.
And so our vetting process looks at that, but then we also gather other information, and I won't bore anybody with that. So, but that is exactly right. So back to the retention question.
Back to the
retention question.
Back.
So I would say that what we've found so far is that those organizations that don't have 501c3 status are more likely to use the Global Giving platform as a key part of their strategy for fundraising in the United States or in the UK.
Right.
And so the retention rates would be higher. For a 501c3, they have a lot more outlets. They have Network for Good, and they have GuideStar, which is powered by Network for Good.
Right.
At least last time I checked. And lots. I mean, there's, as we all know, lots of social networks for social good, where if you're in GuideStar, you can just plug yourself in and fundraise. Just give, just giving, depending on what country you're in. And so we're struggling a little bit with how to continue to add value for those 501c3s on an ongoing basis. And in fact, we've recently kind of restructured the project team that works with the organizations around the world. We've added a dedicated communications person. We just revamped the entire online system that they use for posting projects and updating projects. And we're, again, stealing from Katya, who's, of course, the master of all this, and we're going to try to provide them with more. And
Katya Andreessen, for those of you who don't know, is from Network for Good and wrote
the book Robin Hood Marketing.
Exactly, and does wonderful, huge, what she calls 911, nonprofit 911 calls about marketing and online fundraising. And so you guys should certainly check out Katya Andreessen and her nonprofit 911 blog.
Because we steal a lot of that and share it with the non-US guys.
Great resources.
Yeah. So that's the answer.
So,
what was the question?
While we were on the subject, we've kind of been going around the open challenges that you guys are doing.
Yep.
Can you just talk a little bit more about how your open challenges work and how people that are out there who would want to participate and get on the site could participate in those challenges?
Sure. So there are really three ways that organizations end up on Global Giving. The first is, and this is historical, so I'll tell you about what percentages come from different channels. One is that we work with some organizations who are referrers or project sponsors. So a great example of this would be Ashoka.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a relationship with Ashoka, and Ashoka Fellows, who are part of their Innovators for the Public program, or Youth Venture,
Mm-hmm,
their different
mm-hmm.
programs, can post projects on the site.
Okay.
Okay, because essentially Ashoka has already vetted them in a different way than we do, but these guys have worked with somebody at Ashoka in their core program, so they can post a project on the site. And there are a couple other organizations like that where we have those sorts of sponsorship relationships. The second way organizations get on the site is kind of similar, but a little different, which is through corporate partners. And so we work with Nike, for instance. We power the entire Nike Workplace Giving program worldwide. And so part of that program is that employees can nominate nonprofits in both the U.S. and outside the U.S. for inclusion on this portal that we've built for them.
Okay.
So, a non-insignificant number of projects come through our corporate partnerships.
Right.
And then the third way, which is the sort of more open/public way, is through these open challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So we receive probably 100 inquiries a month from organizations that are interested in posting their projects on the site. They do that at globalgiving.org/open. And the information is there about, what does it take from a due diligence standpoint and a process standpoint for U.S. organizations versus non. And then what we do is we kind of corral them into these quarterly challenges.
Okay.
So that the worst thing that could happen is a project goes up on the site, the organization doesn't try to fundraise, and then the project sits there and raises no money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It just clutters things up, and it's more effort for everybody involved, and not a lot of inspiration for donors.
Right.
So what we decided is that in order for people to stay on the site, we run these challenges where we put up, as I was describing, a little bit of prize money, and every organization...
What's a little bit?
A couple $1,000s.
Okay.
I mean, I think in this challenge that we're running now, which has raised, $170,000 already, and still has almost a week to go, I think we got about $15,000 of total prize money. And so each organization, each project has to demonstrate that they understand what the platform is, that they do have some networks, that they can mobilize a little bit. So they have to generate at least $4,000 of donations from a minimum of 50 donors.
Okay.
And once they do that, they've secured a place on Global Giving indefinitely. Okay. And the ones who are at the top will get the prize money.
Right.
So what we see is people secure their site on Global Giving, and then they compete at the very end for that prize money. So it keeps the enthusiasm going.
So that's interesting. So you're using the ability to be on your site as a part of the prize itself. Your folks, if they want to be on your site, they have to work for it. And why is that? Why are people willing to do that?
Well, they're willing to because we're fun.
Do they get these T-shirts?
I have a T-shirt for you. Don't you worry. They get things. They get money.
Right. Well, the reason I ask that is because there are so many sites out there. I mean, you can log on to you can create a Ning page. There are a lot of things you can do.
If you're a 501c3.
That's true, too.
If you're a 501c3. So I would say if you were to look at the 150-some that are participating now, I would bet that a lot of them are not 501c3s.
Right.
Okay, so this is access to the platform is part of the prize. Right. And why would they want that? Because in many cases they don't have another way to fundraise. In the United States, we essentially are acting as their fiscal sponsor. We have tools they can use, right? The organization can use, we have all sorts of social media tools, share tools. We have built-in ability for them to communicate with the donors through the project updates. So it's, there's a set of tools they can use. And then, the third thing is we do our own marketing. And there's absolutely the chance that an organization that markets its projects well and does good updates will be visible on our website,
Right.
More visible. We have an algorithm so that if you search, say, for education in South Africa, the order in which the projects come up is based upon how engaged the project organization
Interesting.
is. So it's based upon the frequency and quality of their updates, the number of donors they have, etc. So
Okay.
it's not just randomized.
Right.
So there are incentives for engagement.
Right. Right.
And so, the ones that figure that out and
Right.
use the platform then are visible when someone, a searcher
Right.
comes to the site and says, I want to see what's out there in South Africa. I just got back from
Right.
a trip or whatever. And then there is occasionally the chance that one of our awesome corporate partners or an individual that we help with their philanthropy might be interested in a particular area of the world.
Right. Right.
And so by being part of the Global Giving platform and sort of performing well on the platform in the ways I just described, if I'm talking to Dell,
Right.
and Dell says, we really care about youth technology training centers in Mexico, then I can go, to the pod next to me,
Right.
and say, okay, who do we work with that does
Right.
this and does
Right.
it well? And that conversation resulted in almost $1 million for an organization that does work in Brazil and Mexico.
There is incentive for engagement, right?
So
there.
that's rare.
Right. Right.
That is rare.
Right.
But the $10,000 and the they add up.
Right. Right.
Especially
Absolutely.
for small grassroots organizations.
Absolutely. It's so funny. I always tell grantees and different iterations when I've had lots of grantees. It's always good to keep your head up and to send little pictures and photos and articles beyond your grant report, so that your program officer or whoever you're working with kind of always knows the good work that you're doing, because
Absolutely.
you never know what opportunities are lying on the
Under
radar
the surface,
screen,
yeah.
under the surface. Absolutely. So we're running out of time soon, but I do want to get to one more question before we close, and that was kind of the flip side of the advice that you would have for the individual or the nonprofit that wanted to compete in the challenge. What is the advice that you would offer to foundations, other online giving or engagement websites, or corporations that were interested in running these wide-scale prize and challenge programs? What are the first questions that they need to ask themselves before they decide to go this route?
Wow, that's a great question. Did you send me that on the questions?
I think it was lower.
I never got to it. It didn't show up on my PDA screen. Boy, that's a great question. Okay, let me think about that. So, and these are going to be in random order because I haven't thought about it in an organized way.
Okay.
So clearly, tolerance for risk.
Right.
Right? I mean, so I don't know if the Chase folks are on here, but they were doing this great program. Right. I mean, incredible,
the Chase Giving
groundbreaking
Challenge,
Chase Giving Challenge. And is that what it's called?
The Chase Community Giving Challenge, something along that line.
And they got sort of.
Someone send us the correct name of the program.
Right. So they got some grief. And, everybody's learning in this process, and it's like, but that they got grief, and so you have to be able to take that.
Right.
And Pepsi's getting grief, and you guys probably got grief.
Absolutely.
And we do.
Right.
And so there definitely needs to be a tolerance for risk, both brand risk as well as knowing how far you're willing to go on the innovation scale as it relates to the types of things you're willing to let in.
Right.
I mean, everybody doesn't have the same absorptive capacity of risk as what Pepsi's
and
doing.
I know there are intense conversations even there about
absolutely.
Yeah.
And there will come a time in refresh where something is turned down just because it's not right. It doesn't feel right. And that'll create. So that's one thing is understand your risk tolerance. I think a second thing is to really think about what it is you're trying to do. So right now, Sam's Club is running something for their members, a voting contest, very similar to Chase, and it's only for Sam's Club members, and that's what they wanted to do. So it's smart. They're engaging their members that was their core
Mm-hmm.
focus on this sort of crowdsourcing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think sometimes the tendency is, oh, well, look at what so-and-so's doing, let's do the
Right.
same thing.
Right. Right.
You really got to know who are you trying to engage and
Mm-hmm.
for what.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a key challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third thing, and this is going to sound completely self-serving, is work with partners who've done this before.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's many of the larger programs have set up advisory groups,
Uh-huh.
as we
Uh-huh.
sort of alluded to earlier, and I think that's
Absolutely.
really important.
Absolutely.
Even if it's a small scale thing, but work with partners who've done it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Pepsi reached out to you,
Right.
to help out with some of their processes,
Right,
because
right.
they knew that you guys
Right.
have lived through this and,
Right.
and have some great learnings.
And we spend a lot of our time. We will talk to anyone who wants to know the lessons that we learned.
Right.
Yeah.
And people take advantage of Michael right here.
Did I say everyone?
But it really, there aren't that many organizations, either for-profit, non-profit, foundation, etc., who really have built the infrastructure to do this well. And so, I'll put in my plug for Global Giving. We
Right.
feel like we know how to do this.
Right.
We've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, about 20 challenges.
And about
of
how much
different
money
types.
has come out of this?
Oh, several million. And if you
Amazing.
count Pepsi, of course.
Amazing. Right.
But yeah,
Excellent.
several $1,000,000, and as I mentioned earlier in this current one, $15,000. Our last global challenge put up, I think, 12,000, and it generated 400,000 of donations.
Amazing.
So the
Amazing.
leverage
Great leverage.
is great,
Right.
and that's what a company wants, or a
Absolutely.
foundation wants.
Absolutely. So the advice that you heard from Donna, if you are some sort of entity, a corporation, an organization, if you want to think about starting one of these online challenge programs, the 3 questions that you need to ask yourself are: 1, what is your tolerance for risk? Or how innovative can the ideas be? Your second question that you need to ask is kind of, who is your audience? Who and what are you? Who are you trying to reach, and what are you trying to do? And then third, work with partners that have done it before. I've told people before at the Case Foundation, we make mistakes so you don't have to.
Right.
We're willing to kind of be that early edge and try things and break a few eggs.
I know that
so
feeling.
others don't. So don't break the eggs when someone else already broke
I'll
them.
expect you're going to break some.
Right, you expect some, but you can eat the first omelet first. That's already been made for you. So we are about out of time. I just want to say a tremendous and humble thank you to Donna Callejon
Thank
from
you.
Global Giving for taking her time today, but also to the whole Global Giving team for just being
They rock.
tremendous innovators in this space.
Thank
We've had a chance to spend time with a lot of folks on your team, and you all are running an organization that is certainly cutting edge, and we're glad to call you partners and friends. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And-
And right back at you.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you for participating today. Remember, if you kind of came in late, we will have the entire video from today's session up live at recorded at casefoundation.org later today. So come back to casefoundation.org. And also check out our new blog series called Citizen-Centered Solutions, where we are interviewing all sorts of innovators in this space. You can look for interviews coming up soon with the Knight Foundation and their News Challenge, with American Express's Partners in Preservation program. We'll hear a little bit more about Pepsi. We've heard from NetSquared, from Give Minnesota, and we're asking the tough questions, so make sure you watch out for that series. Thank you so much again. Have a great day.
I feel like Doreen Gensler. And you look like Jim Bates.
Thanks. That's an earring.
Aren't we supposed to do this?
Yeah, probably so. So that was fun.
Yeah, good. We're done. Outtakes.